everybody. My name is Diana Nightingale. I'm a horticulturist at Descanso Gardens. We're a lovely little public garden here in La Cañada, Flint Ridge, just about 30 minutes north of Los Angeles here in Southern California. And one of my biggest collections that I work on are the camellias, which we're kind of known for. So I'm going to talk to you today about what's going on in our camellia collection. So a little example of kind of the incredible diversity that you can get within camellias. You get everything from a single layer of petals to crazy stamen bundles to almost peony-like kind of bundle of beautiful petals. And then the leaves can be really diverse as well, from very minute to very large and really rich kind of networks of veins. So here at Descanso, we think we have probably around 5,000 to 6,000 camellias. I think we are considered still the second largest, having the second largest camellia collection in the United States. However, only we're about a third of our collections remain unidentified. Because really up until the 1990s, there wasn't a consistent recording system for the collection. So we're really on a mission to figure out what we have. And a big part of that is we need to know, especially as we embark on this changing climate, what is special about our collection and how do we preserve it. But camellias are really tricky when it comes to identification. We have some really awesome sources that we use to help us with ID, but because of this incredible diversity in the camellia world, they're a little bit incomplete. So this is kind of an ongoing process of figuring out, what do we have and how do we protect it? So our camellia collection is really broken down into a number of different smaller collections. And these are really developed around kind of when did we acquire some of these camellias, where did we acquire them from, who might have been behind them, hybridized them, or propagated them. And I'm just going to go over a few of these that are particularly important to us currently. A quick little overview to Descanso. Our camellia collections were actually originally designed as a plantation. So Manchester Bodie, who bought this property, I believe in the 1930s or so, originally kind of imagined, utilizing this property to support a kind of flower market, essentially. So he would grow the camellias and try to ship them out to colder regions of the country during the winter. And didn't quite pan out, but nevertheless, he kept collecting camellias, and hence the collection got going. So the Star Nursery camellias really come from this era. The Star Nursery was a nursery ran by Mr. Uematsu. He was a Japanese American propagator heavily of camellias, but also of flowering cherries. And Manchester Bodie bought the vast majority of the stock when he and his family were forced into the Japanese internment camps in 1942. And this purchase really kind of laid the foundation of the camellia collections that you see today here at Descanso. So we were actually on a mission to try to find where those camellias went and how do we protect them going forward. And we're placing a kind of renewed interest on this because of this new research that has been coming out by American Studies scholar Wendy Chang. She works through Scripps College over here in Claremont, California. And she's been working with the descendants of Mr. Uematsu to kind of piece together their story and memories about this original acquisition. And as a result, through kind of, working with her and the descendants of Mr. Uematsu, and then also IDing more and more of the camellias that we don't know, we've been able to kind of track down where those camellias went in the landscape and let people know so they can see this remarkable legacy that he left. Another really important collection for us are our Yunnan reticulatas. Back in 1948, notable hybridizer and horticulturist Walter Lemertz started communicating with Professor Tsai at the Kunming Botanical Institute, asking about Camellia reticulatas, because at this time, reticulatas were starting to, gain some people are starting really all over the world to gain some interest in these different cultivars. And so Professor Tsai really generously shipped over about 20 different cultivars so that they could be established here at Descanso. And so that's a particularly important collection to us here at Descanso as well. And then another collection that we're putting a lot of focus on are our species camellias. There was an original effort back in the late 1990s and early 2000s to build up this diversity here at Descanso. Unfortunately, a lot of those original seedlings didn't survive, but we're trying to rebuild that collection going forward. So within our really wonderful camellia collection, we are experiencing a whole series of different challenges. We live in a Mediterranean climate, so we experience wet, sometimes very wet, mild winters, and very hot, dry summers. Sometimes we go 9-10 months of the year without any kind of rain or water at all. But over the last 5 years, we've been experiencing a whole range of really kind of exceptional weather events. So we've been seeing really, really incredible heat waves, some, of course, very dangerous droughts and water limitations as a result of that. And especially this year, we've been seeing some really extremely heavy winter storms. And that's brought a lot of flooding to our garden, really heavy levels of erosion. It's kind of amazing how much erosion we're seeing in our garden, and then unusually low snow levels as well. So we're also, some of our challenges actually go kind of way back into our history. Descanso Gardens kind of native, the land's native habitats include oak woodlands and chaparral. And Manchester Bodie saw the woodlands as kind of this opportunity for a new camellia plantation because the oak canopy could provide this protective cover. However, that turned out to be a really bad original design because coast live oaks and camellias have radically different water requirements. Coast live oaks really, they want whatever nature's going to give them pretty much, and very, very little, if any kind of water whatsoever during the summer. But camellias, of course, really need consistent moisture throughout the year. So planting them together has created a lot of challenges for both of our collections. And we're especially seeing a lot of diseases spreading between the two. So the results of kind of this pairing of really extreme weather events and kind of a bad partnership between oaks and camellias is that we're losing our canopy rather quickly. Our oaks have developed a really shallow root system and are very sick, suffering from a lot of different diseases and pests, but especially armillaria, which is particularly disastrous. And so as a result of this, our oaks tend to drop branches in the heat of the summer and often fall over during really heavy winter storms, crushing the camellias below and then leaving others kind of open and at the mercy to the sun during our hot summers. And just recently, just a couple of weeks ago, we had a really heavy storm and we lost 7 oaks overnight. It was pretty amazing. And of course, with this dwindling canopy, our camellias are experiencing much more sun scald. And it's not just affecting the leaves, but also the bark too. So the very thin bark on camellias is kind of cracking away and leaving them vulnerable to diseases. And then we are, of course, as many gardens experience, we're struggling with a number of diseases. But really the most problematic ones are these 2 diseases, Botryopsferia and Phomopsis, both fungal diseases, which cause really nasty cankers and branch dieback. And we suspect that it's been getting especially worse over the last decade because of these really extreme heat waves that we are experiencing. And we think we've lost probably hundreds of camellias to these 2 fungal diseases. And then, of course, water limitations with the kind of multi-year drought that we've been experiencing here in California. We have to really kind of, start to pull back how much water we're using. And at times we've even been asked to turn off our water. Just last September, a big portion of the county, Los Angeles County, was asked to turn off their water for 2 weeks because of some emergency repairs that needed to be made. And ironically, it happened at during two of the hottest weeks of the year. So it was really intense trying to prepare our camellias for that 2 week dry period. And we did that by just building the moisture in the soil as best we could in preparation for that water turn off. And the camellias came through pretty well, but we know we have to prepare for potentially those situations becoming more and more common for us here in California. We also have really an outdated irrigation system. It breaks pretty regularly and it's actually pretty inefficient. But piece by piece, our irrigation specialists are fixing the system so that we can more effectively, give water to our plant collections where it is needed. So meeting the challenges, we have a new, really exciting master plan that we designed with the landscape architecture team at a local design firm called Rios. Really geared towards addressing a lot of these challenges. And so a big part of that is building a new nursery, which you can see up here at kind of the far left-hand side of this map. Building a new nursery so that we can better preserve the genetic material that we have here on site of our most historic collections, especially our camellias. Our plan is also to separate the oaks and the camellias so we can save both of those collections. Originally, those two were planted throughout where you see this pink and this blue circle all together. But our plan is to slowly separate those so that we can give both those collections what we need, because they're both an important part of our story. Of course, we need to restore the canopy over the camellias. And then a big part of the master plan is effectively capturing and reusing water right here on site. And then making our collections more accessible to our visitors. And then in response to this larger kind of garden-wide master plan, I've been working on a more camellia collection specific plan, which will mirror a new plant collection policy being developed by my good friend and colleague, Autumn Ayers, who is our garden records and collections manager. And ultimately, both of these are hopefully going to guide better curatorial management and design decisions going forward. And so a big focus in this master plan for me is to develop that protective canopy using new kinds of tree species, reshaping our camellia collections using a lot of trial plants and gardens, and the designing new gardens that'll better kind of communicate the unique stories and histories of our collections to our visitors. And so this is kind of my working master plan that I'm always editing a little bit here and there as I go. But it's a couple of things to kind of pull your eyes towards is, this right here on the left-hand side, developing kind of more of these kind of experimental areas where we can test new kinds of camellias that might be able to better tolerate our climatic changes. And then developing other gardens, such as memorial gardens, or also gardens that talk about kind of where these camellias come from. And then of course, replanting that canopy. And yeah, so that's a work in progress, essentially. So some recent things that we have already embarked on that are in our plans includes our new nursery. It is pretty much finished, finally, which means that we have a lot more of the facilities and resources that we need to better propagate those camellias in our collections that are at risk and of particularly importance to us and our community. We're embarking on much better disease management practices. So any kind of camellia material, just in case of potential infection, is disposed of properly. And then we're disinfecting our tools between every single pruning cut that we make on a camellia. And we are an organic facility, so we don't use any pesticides or fungicides. So a big focus is on, proper pruning and proper disposal means. So yeah. And then we are also, and this is kind of exciting, we are restarting that species collection kind of edition. So we've been, with the help of Nuccio's Nurseries, are very good friends of the garden, longtime friends of the garden. They donated a bunch of camellia species that we now have planted out in the landscape, and those are kind of being tested to see how well they will do in our changing landscape. And then we are looking to kind of rebuild our reticulata collection. We've lost a lot of the original reticulatas. They don't seem to be standing up very well to the changing climate and the diseases we're struggling with. So we're actually trialing new and more reticulata hybrids because those seem to be a little bit more resilient out there, just to make sure that we are able to maintain their representation in our collections and in our history. So yeah, those are some of the things that we are embarking on, with much more to come. So thanks so much for being here with me. And if you have any questions or advice or anything, feel free to reach out to me at my email address. Thanks again.